No problem, sir.
Yeah, let me share my screen. So any questions from previous class?
Actually, I haven't done any thing, Shrikant, but before that I did the triggers part, I started it. Yeah, so far everything looks good.
Okay. So let's start today with asynchronous effects. So typically, for any company, so we may have some requirements. Okay, nightly run some process, or whenever or monthly we need to some process, and also there is something like ownership changes for any company. So record ownership, let's say account ownership, every month. Uh, Typically, they give a set of accounts saying, okay, hey seller, you work on these accounts, and maybe next month we may have to change that ownership of those accounts to somebody else. And also, let's say if anyone leaves the company, so those accounts or any open opportunities, those we might need to pass it on to some other employee. So at that time, the one way to do those kind of things is to use Apex. Asynchronous Apex. Potentially, we write some batch jobs and we run them, and based on some conditions, it will pick, okay, hey, this was the previous employee. Now this going forward, this is the new employee. Old employee versus new employee. So that's how we assign our ownerships. There will be a number of use cases where we might have to write this batch classes. And so let's go through some of those scenarios, and also any long running processes. So let's say we need to send some emails, or we need to call some web services, potentially fire and forget scenarios. So when something happens, we need to do something else, and the user doesn't need to know that something else. So typically, when you create a contact, let's say if you want to create some open opportunity or something, typically the end user, whoever is creating the contact, they may or they may not care whether to see that opportunity immediately. So at that time, behind the scenes, we create an opportunity using something called the future method. So and link this contact to that opportunity. So, and also if at all we want to create any orders, whenever there is a closed opportunity, let's say we want to create a opportunity, order, that order we have to create it in the external system. So at that time, potentially what we have to do, as soon as an opportunity is won, so basically in the trigger we get that update, and on the trigger we will fire an web service to call the external system. And at that time, we don't need to wait. Sometimes that external system might take some time to create order and all, and we don't have to wait at that time for that response to come back. So typically in those scenarios, we use asynchronous effects, and especially for asynchronous effects, we have multiple ways to do. One is to use feature methods, and we can write some batch jobs, and also we can write some queuable effects. So multiple ways to do things, and each one has its own advantage and disadvantage kind of thing. Let's start with feature methods, how we write those. And also, let's take the same scenario that we are working. What we started, so basically, whenever we create a task, so we are updating that contact last touch date. So let's say we got that requirement today, and we implemented that one. And so going forward, so whenever we create an event, so we want to update that um, contact with that one, with that last touch date for that one. Instead of writing that this synchronous calls, synchronous means that was executing immediately. As in the after trigger, we were calling an apex method earlier, and that one executing in the same trigger context, and it is waiting for the response to come back, or maybe waiting for that contact field to be updated, and then it was coming back to the same trigger context, and we were moving on. So the same process, let's take that one. Instead of calling that existing um, uh, synchronous method, so this time we use feature method. So with the feature method, the thing is we are done with that task update, and it will fire another process, and in that process it will update the contact. Let's see that one. Obviously, we whenever something happens, so it will start that trigger, because you updated task, and task will fire the task trigger. And in the task trigger, we have to tell contact to be updated, but this time we will use feature method. The way we use feature method, syntax is pretty straightforward. Obviously, we have to have the class, and all we have to do is adding an annotation to the method feature. And for feature methods, they won't return anything. All the time it has to be void, so the return type. And I believe the method also has to be static. And the main thing is this one won't take it only takes primitives, and it won't take s objects. So like here we were passing, I mean somewhere we were passing some contacts directly, the trigger dot new. So those things, it won't take s objects. It only takes ids, integers, strings, those kind of things. So that's the syntax. I mean, it has to have feature, and it has to it should be static, and it won't return anything, and only primitives it will take, and rest of the process is same. So um, so let's try to create this guy first, and we will use that one. So same thing. I mean, I have this thing, so let's try to write it in the better way. So we will call this guy as, since we are going to update contact, let's call this contact service. So we don't need constructor. So this guy, I mean, I copy paste this code. I mean, it's going to be the simple one. See contact. So simply what we are doing, so I mean same thing. So we expect the whoever is calling this one, so they have to pass this set of contact, the set of IDs of those contacts, and now we have to retrieve that last contact. I mean we are starting with a task service, and task trigger will have that who ID field, and that who ID field they can prepare a set, and we will pass it. They will pass it to the this method. And once we got that one, so the main thing that we wanted to check, if that contact already has last completed date equal to today, so we don't need to again update the same contact with the today's date. That's why we are excluding that one. And again, so if we also need to consider if that contact has last completed task date empty, so that one I mean, that's our where condition. And obviously, we only need to work on the contacts that are going through the task trigger. So that's why we are adding that particular condition. And once we got that one, all we have to do is last touch date for those contacts. We have to just set the state date to today's date. Pretty much same code that we used last time. And so we just added the future method. That's all we did. And now the task trigger. So when we go to the task trigger, and because that's where everything has to fire, so we need to basically just use this thing. So obviously, I mean, this one has this trigger.new. Trigger.new has that S object. We don't want to use S object. Potentially, we have to convert that S object. So let's do a few things here. So we need to get only the IDs set, and we need to pass that one. That's all we need to do here. And maybe in the task service itself, maybe inside we will create one more method, capture some contact set of a contact ID set, and then we will call this contact service this method. So let's go to this task service, and so let's capture. Yeah, so basically we have this thing here, and yeah, task service has this guy. So maybe we will refactor this code a little bit, and all we are doing is yeah, we need, yeah, so basically, yeah, this one should be okay. So in the task service, the way we are calling this guy, so here we are getting all the trigger.new, and from the trigger.new, so we are capturing, I mean, we obviously we have to check the status whether it is completed first thing based on our conditions, and then whether it has who ID populated. So we are capturing that guy, and we are preparing that set. So the set of contact IDs, we have that guy, and now we need to call. So instead of this guy, so let's call our new thing. And before that, let's also deploy this code. I think it's okay, or both we can deploy at the same time. This contact service. Okay, so basically all we did was from the task trigger, it will send the trigger.new. From the trigger.new, based on our condition, we are capturing that contact set, contact ID set, and contact ID set we are passing to contact service class. And this method, last completed task date, is a feature method, and that's the one we are calling. Once we call, basically from here, it is not going to run in the same transaction context. It is going to run in a different transaction context. So that's what we are going to see. And let's deploy these things first. So let's deploy the contact service. And then let's deploy the trigger also.
So, Shrikant, I just have a question over here for the @future. Is that the only way it will say it is a service?
It's a future method. Basically, future method means it is not running in the same context. It is running in it will have its own governor limits and everything. Basically, it restarts everything And also for asynchronous calls, you will get more limits, basically better limits, a little bit of extra limits. So yeah, this is the way you tell the system it is going to run in a different context.
Okay, so like at future, do we have any other keywords too?
Yeah, there are a number of keywords like this. There will be ORA enabled. So ORA enabled means typically whenever you need to call from the front end Lightning Web components or ORA components, you need the method needs to have the ORA enabled. And uh, yeah, there will be a lot of annotations like this one.
Okay, okay. And I mean, like, so you have names, the class name with suffix service, right? So that is just for our,
Yeah,
that is just.
this one is, I mean, usually uh, for each object, we will write a service class.
Correct, okay.
And whenever we are working with contact, you write contact service. Typically, you write logic for contact related. And for task, I mean, because it is object, and I mean, that's some naming conventions we follow.
Okay.
This guy, right? So task and contact.
Yeah.
Are those the ones you are asking?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we wrote service, right? I mean, as a naming convention, did you write it, or is it more
Yeah.
like?
So just naming conventions. So
Yeah.
it can be anything. So I mean, as you see, so there are some temp classes. I mean, this is some temp class that I wrote earlier,
Okay.
and it is just some naming convention.
So when we go back to task service, that will be running in the current.
Yeah. So this one, since trigger whenever you update anything from the UI or even from batch job, when you, I mean, when you do data load or something. So first update happens, and update that is kind of synchronous mode, and it goes to the trigger. From the trigger directly, since we are calling um, the main class, task service class, that is also going to run in the same context. And since we did not say anything like future or anything,
It
that
will
is
run.
still going to run in the same context. Then in the end, so whenever we call this guy, since we annotated with future, that's the only thing that is going to run in asynchronous context.
Thanks.
We will see all this stuff now. So now, so let's deploy this thing. Okay, looks like we already deployed both of them. Don't need all of this. Let's remove this. So now it should be very simple code. One class is calling other class is calling other class, and finally we are calling asynchronous class. That's all we are doing. And logic, I mean, I want I take the same example again and again so that we see we can correlate these things easily. So let's try to run these things now. And before that, I have some housekeeping things. Okay, actually, since we are going to update, yeah, let's go to Salesforce. Let's try to create a task and close the task, and then we see how that batch jobs, I mean, the feature methods are firing.
So over here, you can also write system.debug, right?
Yeah. So I mean, that is going to run in asynchronous, and it will show it a little later. And so I also want to show you something with the debugger. Last time that I wanted to, I mean, I was trying, but that didn't work. So let's also set that one. So basically what I did was in the backend, okay, actually, let me show you that one first. So we go to this debug logs. So let me go this here. So I created a debug level. I gave this name from CLI. Basically, since we are going to call this one from CLI, I gave that name. And main thing, Apex code, we have to set different log levels. So I mean, how each log, I mean, for each operation, whenever a transaction is running, so it has to go through some workflows, validation rules, callouts. Callouts are the ones that we are talking. Feature methods are nothing but callouts, and Apex code, Apex profiling. So Visual Force, basically, it will go through all these things. That's why I created one debug level. And so this is the debug level we are going to call here. You see here SFDX force log Apex tail, and I'm giving that name here from CLI. So that's the name I'm using. Basically, we're telling the system, hey, go look at this log. I mean, whatever the conditions that we set, and get me those logs. That's what we are saying. And also we are asking them to add some colors. And so this is some grep command. I mean, some Unix thing. And we are telling, okay, hey, I'm only interested in circle statements and user debug. So basically give me only those kind of things. And I write some README document. I put it in the GitHub. You can go through that. But basically, whenever something happens, we are asking the system, I mean, the CLI to listen to that and immediately write it in here instead of us going to download the file and maybe start debugging. So, I mean, when we need to debug, potentially we will do that. But this one is a little easy way to see those debug statements. So I'm just going to run this guy. And now it is waiting for some process to run, and potentially at that time it is going to write it here. So now let's go, I mean, that housekeeping is ready for us. Now let's go back to Salesforce. And let's create one task.
So do we use the terminal way of checking the debugging logs a lot?
I mean, that is one of the ways. When we do something, we will come back and check that one. So that is one of the ways.
Okay.
I mean, I thought that is easy. I mean, I like that one. But when we want to debug, we need that file, and there are ways to debug the files easily, and then we can start start that Apex debug and that stuff. We can the earlier one, the way we were debugging, so that those things are still the same.
Okay. Okay.
So I will pick this Arthur song, and let's check what is the last updated date on, I mean, last task date on this Arthur guy. So I have this sales. So today's date is 6/12. So let's pick this guy. And on this guy, right now, the last updated date is 5/31. Now, if we create a task, and when we set the task to completed, our trigger should fire. And once the trigger is fired, so the feature method has to fire, and then that should set the status, I mean, the date to today's date. That's the expectation. So let's create the task. And the way you look at those, so you might need this guy. So let's open one more page where we see those feature methods and all, where that fires. And here we will call Apex. So basically we can see all of those and under from setup, we have to go to this Apex jobs. And now, so we will wait, I mean, we'll come back to this guy. And now, so let's set this one to started, I mean, the completed. Once we do that thing, see here, the terminal, it is already writing. So whatever that we wrote, So this is coming from the trigger, from debug trigger. And so let's see the task trigger. So,
How will we know which one is user debug, Shrikant?
what is that?
You said like you want to see either SOCL or user debug, right?
Yeah,
Where
yeah.
we see.
So you see this guy, SOCL execute
Yeah.
beginning and
Yeah.
SOCL execute end,
And
and those are the SOCL statements. And also you see
correct.
select statement that we wrote.
That
And
one.
here these are the system.debug statements that we put it in the trigger.
Okay. So those are the user debug. Okay.
Yeah. So let's see where is the trigger guy. Okay, task trigger. So
Yeah,
here
yeah. Now I
there's
remember.
one debug statement inside the
Yeah.
trigger executable task. So that's this guy.
Yeah.
Yes, basically that was when at the time of insert, and then and after that basically nothing happened, and then we updated the status, and then again it came back, and so it came back here and it executed that guy, and in the trigger. So now task service is there, and then it goes back to task service. It goes here now again. So at line number 5 or contact service. So there is contact service, and line number 5.
SOCL.
It's 5. Okay, yeah, that's where we have this SOCL statement, SOCL begin.
Yeah.
And so basically, since we updated only one contact, so that one gave us one record. And now since we have one record, it basically updated that guy. And and this guy is running in future. And now let's see the future thing. So here, that didn't run actually. Okay, we didn't refresh the page.
There will be no time limit or something like that
For
for the asynchronous calls. Like when you say future, how?
basically increased time limits. So there will be see here. So this
Yeah.
is the class we called contact service, and
Oh
this is
yeah,
the
job
method
type
we
future.
call. So that's I mean, if we go back to the terminal, so we can see the contact service, and that's the method. And since that one has future, and so that's the reason why we have that thing there.
Future job type.
Yeah, so that's how, I mean, this is how we can check these guys. I mean, if at all anything wrong happens, because it is happening in the asynchronous mode. So you see here, when I was trying something, there was syntax error, and you don't know when the end, as an end user, when you execute it, you run the trigger, and the trigger is passing to a different context. The end user won't even know something error happened. So then the developer has to go back, check, okay, hey, what happened to this feature method? And here it is some feature method or batch method that I wrote, and that I ran into some problem. So that's where we have to come and check these details here. So
So does this log even when even when we don't do that debug log? Like I mean.
yeah. So this is not debug log. This is
Okay.
Apex error. Whether you write debug or not, I mean, it will throw that one. I mean, even if you write debug log system.debug, that won't show here. That is a
That is a user
system thing.
log.
Yeah, whenever it ran into some issue, if it is synchronous, it was writing it to the end user right there to the screen saying, okay, hey, go contact your system admin and all. So
Okay.
this is a different way, since it is a synchronous process. So it has to write somewhere. That's why, I mean, for us to monitor, so we have to come here.
So only asynchronous job classes write to Apex jobs.
Yeah.
Is that how? Okay.
Mhm. Yeah. So now, I mean, that's the feature method. I mean, concept is very similar. Let's say when you want to send emails to somebody, I mean, if you don't need to wait for the end user to stay that process to complete, typically we better go with feature methods.
So over here you mentioned it future, but like we did not mention any time, right? Like run it so and so.
Yeah. Since it is a cloud, it will run when the resources are available on the cloud. Basically, it gives maybe every time you can run maybe let's say 5 processes at a time, asynchronous processes, and potentially Salesforce will check. Okay, hey, now I have some time or I have resources available for you. Let me run it for you. So basically, you write it to the queue and it will execute on its own. That's why we are saying, so the end user doesn't need to worry what happens after that point. And that's why, I mean, those are the use cases where we go for these things. There is no guarantee on the time. Usually it is like maybe few seconds, but even few seconds, why the end user need to wait, right? So in this case, the end user just need to update the task status to complete and he is done. The contact status update or contact last us date is more for managers to see, okay, hey, how many times are we working with each and every contact in the right way that we wanted or not. So those are the way, places, I mean, more of audit reasons we are capturing this field, not really the other than that there is no real reason. Okay. Yeah, so this guy contacts to update. Yeah, so here, I mean, it wrote that guy also. I mean, pretty much all whatever we write now onwards. I mean, we didn't request for debug logs. As soon as something happens in the system, it is writing to the terminal. I mean, this is something easily see the results as a developer. Okay. And if we don't put these grep things and all, potentially it will write the entire log. Since we are only interested in some of that stuff, that's why we are requesting only show me these things. I don't really worry about a variable assignment, all that stuff. We are reducing the debug log. Earlier, whenever we see debug logs, so usually we used to get a lot of
a lot of things. Right.
So now we are basically, yeah. So if you see here, I mean, typically that heap allocate, all that stuff, we get a lot of stuff. I mean, if we really don't care about that, and this is another way to suppress that one. And yes, especially when we go to developer console and all, you can put some filters, and then immediately it was showing that filtered. I mean, whatever the information that you want. This is a way to do a similar thing from the terminal. Okay, so that's that guy. So that is the future method. I mean, there will be a lot of use cases where you need to apply this concept. I mean, whenever you don't need end user to wait, potentially you just take this route. The only downside with this thing, it only takes primitives. It doesn't take subjects directly. That's why in the task service, we have to basically separate those task IDs. Otherwise, I mean, if, it would have been easy to pass the same, I mean, the entire trigger.new and could have done something inside that one. I mean, if we have some use case. But otherwise, I mean, since it is feature methods only take primitives, you have to basically update those things. I mean, when you are passing the details, you have to pass it the way it is expecting. Are we good so far?
Yeah.
Yeah. So then, so that is this guy. So let's say, I mean, still, if you really see, it is only handling when something happens, we are reacting to that guy. But let's say we business gave this requirement just now, and now we have to go back. And I mean, system must be running Salesforce. The company must be using Salesforce for quite a long time. They must have created a lot of events and a lot of tasks in the system already. But what we are doing, so the thing, it is only going to run for the new transactions or the transactions that we end user updates, because it is running from the trigger thing. So what if we have a lot of contacts and all those contacts may have some tasks, and we must have touched those contacts over the time. Now we have to find a way to update this field. So this new field we came up just now, saying, okay, hey, every time, I mean, on each and every contact, let's capture this field. Now we have to go back and adjust all those things, look at all the contacts in the system, and look at all the tasks associated with that contact, and pick the latest task that we closed. And based on that, let's say if we touch that contact maybe a week back, now we need to stamp that one, not today, I mean, because the contact was touched maybe last month or maybe last week, so that date is going to be key for business. Based on that, business will say, hey, you didn't touch this contact maybe for the last 1 month, maybe prioritize your work, go see this contact. So that's how typically the business use cases comes. And now we have to update for each and every contact. If there is a task, completed task, now we have to basically apply the same thing. So here we are updating to the same date, today's date, but there we have to update, we have to find a date. Basically, I mean, either we can take the last modified date of the task, or maybe we can even go on the task, we have that field, due date or something. We can pick one of those date fields, and accordingly we have to write some logic. So on each and every task, yeah, there is due date field. I mean, either we can use that guy, or we can use this last modified by, and also there will be last modified field that system will populate every time we change the status or every time we touch that task. So, I mean, we can potentially take one of those and stamp that particular contact with that date. So that's what we need to write. But there is no trigger scenario now. So we have to, this is where the batch jobs, nightly jobs, or maybe one-time loads, those things will come into picture, and we have to write that job. I mean, something like that. So let's look at that guy.
So in our first classes, we wrote something like updating all the email IDs with dummy, right?
Yeah.
There also we did not use.
So yeah, they're also, yeah, that is also a good use case. I mean, we have maybe a lot of contacts in the system. Now, if business says, okay, hey, update it one time, and potentially either we write a script or run it. And also, if you have millions of records in the system, and you may not be able to run it one time. So like, I mean, the way we wrote that script, and the SQL query only takes 50,000 records at a time.
Few.
Okay. And at that time, it only updates that 50,000. And now you have to basically write that SQL statement saying, okay, hey, get me 50,000 records, and update this thing, and again run this same job one more time and update another 50,000. So we have to do all this crazy stuff. I mean, and we have to run, I mean, we have to run that time, that particular class method, maybe multiple times. So that's where this batch jobs will come handy. And these things will be capable of taking up to 50 million records, and it chunks them into 200 record batches each, and then it will basically run each batch. So basically it starts with 50 million, it will have all of them, and it will pass only 200 records for each batch, or you can even change that 200 to 2000, up to 2000 you can pass for each batch. Now, let's say if you have million records, you run it only once, your system will take care of it, and system will pass a number of batches, and it will run it on its own. And that is the batch, that's where we use the batch jobs. Okay. So let's write this batch job. So same thing, some Apex class we need. Contact, let's call this guy as contact batch. So when we need to write this batch job, the main thing is it needs some interface. Basically, it has to follow some interface. So that is called this database batch pool. I mean, that takes a subject. And that's the main thing we need to add. So the moment we have contact batch, the implements interface, the interface will mandate you to whatever the methods are there that are there in this interface, we need to define those methods, and then only it will even let us save this thing. So now if I try to
Right, yeah.
deploy this guy, potentially it will throw an error saying, okay, hey, you need to install, you need to define or implement this
All the
method.
methods.
One is a start method. So then there is a execute method, and then finally there is finish method. So basically 3 methods that we need to implement. So the start method, basically what it does, yeah, that's where you write your query saying, okay, what are the records you want to consider? And then the execute method, from the start, it will take that 50 million, up to 50 million records, and it will chunk it into either 200 records, or maybe we can even say, okay, how many records we want. So based on that scope, it will pass that many records as a batch, and it will the batch will execute it. Finally,
what is the limitation over there, Shrikant, for execute?
Execute limitation, either you can, if you don't pass any scope, it will take 200 records as default. But if you want to
Okay.
expedite it, you can pass up to 2000 records. What you are saying, okay, hey, I have 50 million records, and if you don't say anything, 50 million records, it will chunk it into 200, 200, basically 50 million.
But we cannot pass the whole thing to it, right?
If you pass whole thing at once, the DML also will have limitations. So it won't take that those things. Basically, your process will fail.
So I can do it 5,000.
2000 at the max you can pass per batch 2000.
Okay.
But by default it takes 200.
Okay.
So now, I wrote a little bit already. The scenario is same. Basically, we have all those tasks ready for us, and we have all the contacts in the system. Now, based on the completed task last modified date, we need to get that one, and we need to stamp it onto the contact. And also, let's say for each contact, we may have 10 tasks. We don't want to take all those 10 tasks, because one task may be done last year, and another task is done maybe this year, or another task will be done last week, because we are calling this field as the last completed touch date, and we only need the last week date, not last year and the last before year. So that's why we need only one record, and somehow we need to get that last updated record. So that's the logic that we need to put in. And so the way we did, let me take one of these things and copy, and I will start explaining this thing. First, we need to get the records. So that's the start method. So here they said, okay, hey, you need to implement that start method. Now we put that start method. It is mandating because we wrote this implement. And if you use that implement, basically you can, the advantage is you can pass more records, and you can schedule this thing to run maybe ad hoc whenever you need. And the start method, it is going to return something called database query locator. There is another one, iterator or something. So we can, I'll pass some documentation so you can check that one. But here we are taking this database query locator. And so we can also pass this query. All it needs is it executes the database get query locator. This method is going to return this type, and we have to pass that query. So whatever the query that we wanted the system to execute, that's what we need to pass. And if you see here, I am putting this query in a quote. Basically, it is a string that it is going to expect as an input. So that's the string that I wrote. And for the string, we are just passing. So this is the bare minimum thing that it is expecting for this method. We just need to write this method because we are using implement database batch. And this guy needs a string and the string is a select query. And for select query, the way we want it, we don't want, we want to pick all the contacts in the system. And if the contact already has today date, there is no point of picking that contact again. So, I mean, since we brought in trigger and trigger is updating, and if it has today's date, there is no point of updating that one again with the today's date. That's why we are excluding that particular record, I mean, that contact. And we also need to, if a contact, I mean, we just got the trigger deployed to production and it start updating that one. There will be lots and lots of contacts that will have empty values on this new field. So that's why we are considering all the contacts that will have, actually, I think it should have last contact date is and condition here. Actually, it shouldn't be today's date. And okay, actually, one or the other, I think we can check that guy. So basically, we also need to consider the blank ones, because it is one record. Yeah, so this one should work, and this one is just for the whoever is running. So basically, we need to make sure they have access to these contacts. That's what we are saying here. And when we execute this method, potentially it executes this query, and it is going to return that one. So basically, it is simply going to execute that SQL statement. Typically, the SQL statement would return 50,000 records, but in this case, because of this implementation, it is going to return 50 million records, up to 50 million records. And one thing that is interesting here, you cannot, even though I mean, this is a runtime value that it is going to execute, and if we put that one, that is going to fail, because it is a string that we are passing. And if we say, okay, hey, execute this at a later time, it can't execute it at that time. So that's why this Apex job, when I ran, so it was giving that error. So
you cannot even have concatenations and stuff like that.
Yeah, you may be able to do concatenation. So potentially you can put this guy and then
and then concatenate.
Yeah, so you may be able to do that one. So that should work. Yeah, 99% that's not a problem. So it should be okay. Yeah, what I'm doing, so basically I'm preparing that one. I mean, ideally, if I mean, last time I think I said let's not define variables. So maybe at that time.
So, but even over here, actually, when you write today, right, it is a variable, right? And then you're parsing into a string. So, which is
today today is a variable. So it is a variable, and variable it will take.
Today is okay.
Yeah, that is a variable. But if we pass this guy, I mean, it will come date dot today, and then it is coming. It is checking this thing, and that's where it was failed.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what it is. And it basically, we got all 50,000 or 50 million record, or up to 50 million records. We get it with this thing. And so now we need that execute method. So now we need to implement this next method. So I mean, this method is very straightforward. All we know what needs to be done. So basically, we are getting this contact. Now we need to get. I mean, we could have written some inner query to get the task also in here, but I mean, they don't. Salesforce recommendation is don't put inner queries in the initial one. It slows the performance. So that's why I'm not putting an inner query here. So we take those 200 records, and in the 200 records, when we're executing, at that time, we will try to get those tasks and get the task last modified date, and then we will update that guy. So that's how we are going to design this thing. So now let's go back to this execute method. Let's copy this code. I will walk you through the code. Oh, I did not define the method. So the method,
Executed.
yeah, execute method. So it needs to, it should follow a little bit of syntax. So let's get that syntax first. Actually, it's pretty much same code that we need. Let's take this whole thing. So again, syntax, there is a batchable context if you need to access any of those job IDs or anything. So then you can get it from this BC job ID, get job ID, that will give you the whatever the job that when I say job, this is the guy. So basically there will be an ID. If you want to retrieve that one, so potentially this BC batchable context will have that ID, and you can retrieve that. And if you need to troubleshoot, or maybe if you want to check the status of that one, potentially we can use that guy. And then the scope is list of a subject. I mean, you can since we know here it is going to be contact, we can also use contact. I mean, most of the time this is how you see the definition of this thing. You pass a list of a subject records or list of the objects that you are going to see, and you just give that one. And then before you are working on the records, you just typecast it. So here, I mean, I could have used directly contact. Just to show you how to do this typecasting one more time. I think we talked about that in the first class. I'm just taking one more time. Basically, whatever the scope that we are getting, this is the 200 records thing. And once we get those 200 records, I'm simply putting it into a list. Once we have that, now we know we have to write this task query. And on the task, I mean, we have on the 200 contacts that we need to work with, and we need to get the tasks. So once we get the task, potentially we can loop through the task, and we can get the last modified date. And when we are updating that contact, so potentially for each contact, and I'm using this map, I will explain one of each and everything. So here, all we are doing is retrieving that task for each and every contact that we got the 200 records. So that's the one we are passing here. And also tasks, we are only considering with the status completed. And also, since we said, okay, there will be tasks maybe last year, last month, and maybe yesterday, all that stuff. So that's the reason why we are picking only we are sorting these records by descending order. So that way, the moment we see one record, when we are passing this, we can ignore, let's say, even if we get for each contact 10 tasks, when we are looping through here, the way I'm doing, so the map, the power of map comes here. So if you see here, I define a map of map and ID date. So basically a map and ID, I'm going to put contact, and date I'm going to put the last modified date of that task. So that's the one I'm going to do. And here when I'm looping through, let's say first contact, it will come, I mean first task, it will come, and it is going through the list. Let's say we have 200 contacts that we are passing, maybe we may get let's say 5,000 total we may get here. And for those 5,000, where we are looping through that. When we loop through that, first record will check, okay, we will get one contact, and for that contact we are checking the map. First time the map will be empty, and if the map is empty and also contains key, so this we are saying, okay, hey map, do you have this contact ID inside you? If you don't, go inside and put that map, fill that map. Basically in the map we are saying the contact ID and last modified date. So last modified date is a date time field. We need to convert, we only need date field. I mean, the way we define the last touch date field, this is date type. So that's why we are converting that using date method. And let's say next when we are looping through this thing, the next maybe 5 records are for same task, same contact. It will check here, okay, hey, do I have this contact in this map? Yes. If it says yes, because we are saying, okay, if it doesn't have, then only we are asking them to fill. Since we did this last modified sort, that because of that reason, so it won't go inside. It only picks for that contact only the first record. So that's how this thing will work. Potentially, we may want to do by contact and by last modified date. Maybe if we do both, that way I think it is going to be more meaningful. I am only doing it by last modified date. Maybe this may have a little bit of problem. I think we can debug it a little bit. But if at all we see some problem, potentially we can add the contact ID also to the sort. So that time it will go through each contact and it will take that contact associated task, and then that's how this list will be. And this one will be filling with only that last modified date for that contact.
Okay. Over here, you are actually getting t.who ID is the task ID, right?
Yeah. So basically this is the object. So we are getting tasks. So lookup field. So if I go back to this guy, so we are looking at this task.
Yeah, that
So
the
this
back
task,
side.
this name field behind the scenes, it is the who ID, and for that this is a lookup field, Salesforce ID of that one. That's the one we are filling. So here. Yeah. So once we got that one, so now the reason why we are doing contact map, we need to have for each contact, the idea is for each contact we need to update the last modified date. So that's why we are preparing. Okay, hey, Arthur Ash, maybe we met you maybe June 1st. Maybe John Smith, we met you maybe March 1st. So that's how we will have that each field and the key value pair. That's what we are getting here in the map. And now we are going through that list one more time, because we don't. So here we are looping through tasks and we got that map. Now we need to, we are starting with the scope is contact scope. Now again, we are looping through each contact, and for each contact, now we need to update this last task, completed task field. So that's the one we are retrieving from that map. So for each contact, when we are going through, we are saying, okay, hey map, do you have this field, this contact ID? If so, just get me that last completed date and fill it for me. So that's what we are saying here. So is this clear here? So yeah, this is where the power of map will come. Otherwise, if we have list, again we have to write one more for loop. And the moment we get that, okay, for that contact, the moment we see the last updated date, we fill that one. Again, we have to somehow break this for loop inside the for loop, and then go to outer for loop. That's how we had to do all this crazy stuff. One contact loop, and again we had to write one task loop, and that's how we have to do. With this map, we don't have to do. So potentially we can improve the speed of this execution. So once we got that contact list to update it with the last modified date, all we have to do is we have to fire that DML operation. Once we fire DML operation for those 200 contacts, it updates. Now, since we said, okay, this is going to have up to 50,000 or 50 million records, now it will pass the next batch, next batch, next batch. So like that, it will take care of all the execution. And finally, it will go through one method, the final finish method. And so here, potentially, if at all we have to capture how many contacts we have updated, all that stuff, we can create an instance variable, and finally we can pass it. And there we can send some email saying, okay, hey, we process these many emails based on this job run. So those audit information to maybe some production support team and all, we can pass it. So now let's take, we don't, since it is mandating us to have that method, we are just adding that. But right now we are not going to write any emails or anything, but that's the use case for finish method. So that's how it is. The method is it has this implements in annotation that we need to add, and the interface that we have to say. And because we are saying that interface, we need to define these three methods or implement these three methods. And the core business logic, we need to add it in this one, and then potentially it will run. So, when we execute this thing. So next thing, let's deploy this class. And also now we are updating this contact. So when the contact is updated, contact trigger will also fire. And let's say for some reason, so this logic, there is nothing that contact trigger. So it might try to go to these contacts, and then the contact trigger. So we have some logic that we wrote, and so this one will say, hey, check for duplicate, dummy email. If it is not there, execute it, all that stuff. We wrote that one, right? So it will try to execute this code also. And if sometimes that may be some performance, since we are updating this contact and we are updating all the fields. And if we don't want this trigger to fire, potentially we need to stop that behavior. So for that, potentially we can say there are some system parameters that we can use, and based on those, we can control the execution of trigger also. If you see here on the task trigger, I implemented something. If system is feature, so basically if it is feature method that is running, so I'm telling the system don't run it. So basically if it is not feature, so then only go inside and execute this thing. And similarly, I think let's see for batch is this trigger. So there is a, I think trigger.is batch, or maybe one of the system.is batch. One of those we need to check. So look at some of this. I think it was trigger context trigger. No, not trigger context system. Okay, yeah, system.is batch. So if since this class is a batch class, and when the batch is running, when we update contact again, it will go back to trigger, and we need to stop that behavior. So that's where we can use this thing, and we can go back to our trigger, and in the trigger we can say here. Oh, so here we are stopping for future. If it is future method that it is running, so we want them to, we don't want it to run. And here we can also say So basically it comes and maybe potentially we can write, I mean, just so that we can see it, system.debug. So we can write it, potentially we can see it here. And obviously, if we write it after, uh, so yeah, if it is regular update, it will go through this thing because we wrote this return statement. It will immediately exit this thing. So now let's deploy this guy. And also let's deploy contact batch. So now we need to know how to execute this batch. We created the batch. Now we need to know how to execute the batch. So basically there is a database execute database classes. I mean the utility class by Salesforce. We can use the database class and it has some methods to execute these things. So basically here, if you see fire batch, database execute, all we have to pass the instance of the batch class that we created. So in this case, we created this contact batch and we don't need to pass any parameters. So we can, I mean, we can simply pass this guy. So fire us, let's go back here. And here all we are doing is contact batch, that's the name. And now if we execute this guy, it will execute all the, it will go through all the contacts. I mean, basically it will go through all the logic. First, it will execute this trigger start method. It will get the records. Then it slowly process one by one or the scope parameter that we are going to give. And based on that, it will execute all those contacts and it will set the thing. And so before that, let's look at our system contact, and let's also give this contact name. And let's execute this thing and see what is the last modified date. I mean, we are just checking the system. How many records have last modified date populated? I mean, last completed task date populated on that contact. So we have Josh Davis. So that one we got this date as 6/1, and the Arthur Sang. I mean, this is the one that we just did an update, and it has today's date. And I mean another one. So potentially these things. I mean we have a few records that has these updates. Let's clear these values on this thing, and then we run the batch, and the batch will take care of updating this thing again. So, I mean, I wrote simple script for that one. All we are doing, okay, we're selecting all these contacts that have last completed date has some value. Potentially, it will take these three things, and I'm setting this to null. So that way, we can reuse the same contacts and same task that we already have in the system. And again, when we run the batch, potentially it has to set these dates. So that's the expectation. So I'm just I mean, instead of creating the data, I mean, if we create the data, because we have the trigger in place, that will set the thing. I mean, the moment we create task, and we update any the task status to complete, automatically it will fill up that one. So that's why we are creating some test data here. Command palette. So now we ran that thing. So now if we execute this one shouldn't have any values now, because we made this guy everything null. So earlier we got 4 records. So expectation is since it is going to wipe off all these things already with that script, now we should be seeing 0 records. Yeah, so basically it executed, but it couldn't find any records that have this last completed date. But we have contacts, but we have tasks that have completed date in the system. Now it is the right time for us to fire this batch. And when the batch runs, basically it takes all those contacts and it will try to set that date for us. Now, and also the way you see here, I mean, this one basically, I believe it only runs for the last 30 minutes or something. Now I'm just executing this thing so that whatever that I mean execution that is going to happen, it is basically it will go through the debug logs and write it into terminal here. That way we can see it. I mean without us downloading the logs and go through each and every log. So that's the idea here. Now let's run this batch. I mean this command. And also the expectation is this one also will go into the same place, the Apex jobs, and it will show it here. It will add one more thing. I mean earlier one is feature one. Now it is going to add a batch Apex, and that one will come here. Let's update this guy. I mean let's run this guy, and the moment we run, and see here, it is already bringing those debug logs. It is showing here. I mean, there are 4 contacts that need to be updated. And also this is the comment that we set. It went to the contact update. And in the contact update, I mean, there is a before update and after update in that one. So that's why it went 2 times in that trigger. And basically it skipped the rest of the debug, I mean, rest of the Apex code that we have on the contact trigger. Otherwise, it would have gone through this thing and it would try to update all that contact email and all. I mean, that's where we need to decide when a particular code should be executed, when particular code should not be executed. So that's where I think whenever there is a performance issue or something, that's where we need to check the code and see whether that particular code has to execute or not. That way we can improve the performance. So now, I mean, let's go back, and we saw the debug logs coming here, and it said it tried to update 4 records. And let's go back to Salesforce once and try to see this thing. Yeah, so the batch Apex ran, and basically whatever the contact batch that we just created, that batch ran. And here it won't say any method because it has to run multiple things there. It has to go to start method, it has to go to execute method, it has to go to finish, and also each job, how many batches that it has to execute, all that stuff it will write. I mean, since we have few records in our system, so it basically, I think we have only 30 contacts or something. And since we didn't pass any scope value, it basically it tries to send default 200. Since we have only 30 contacts in the system, it basically was able to fit all those things in one batch, and it executed it. So now if we go back, execute the same circle statement that we had in the Fire Apex. So here, when we execute this thing, if our logic and everything went through successfully, it should update. I mean, we should get those 4 records with dates. Yeah, so now we got those things. Potentially these things and these things should be matching. So here Josh Davis, and Josh Davis has this guy, and I mean other song has 2-1, and there is 1-5-31. Yeah, so basically we were able to set the contacts to the same last modified date. That's where the batch jobs will come very handy. And now let's say we want to see that million records on those scenario, right? Because we don't have that many records in the system. We want to somehow simulate that thing. I mean, we want to see how that number of batches are firing, all that stuff. So again, let me execute this script and make these values empty just to get our data ready. So we were able to update that thing, and obviously it will to see this guy. This time it went to the trigger thing because we ran in the it is not asynchronous, and we updated contact, and it went into it didn't go into the first thing where we put that trigger control. So it didn't go in here, but rather it went into this thing, and basically that's where it is running this thing, saying, okay, hey, it is not either feature or batch contact, this is synchronous one. I'm going to execute this thing, and it went all through that contact email update, and it checked, okay, whether those emails have those things or not. And I mean, that's the thing here. So now we have the data ready. Again, if we try to fire the batch one more time, but this time what we are going to do, instead of system taking 200 records, we are telling a scope value. So scope value means, okay, for each batch, we are saying, okay, send only 2 records. So if we go back to our batch contact batch, so this is where right now, I think if we execute this total contacts in the system with this thing, with this statement, potentially there are about 30-40 records, and it will take that one. But when we execute this method, it has to pass how many records, so that we can tell, okay, when you pass to execute method, you only pass 2 records at a time. So that way we are going to see a number of batches that are going to fire. So now let's execute this thing.
So can we execute that, just that method, like even before doing the start?
Yeah. So that one you should be able to execute, but you need to pass the scope. I mean, you need to pass, okay, how many contacts, those trigger.new or whatever. You need to write this query. I mean, list of contact. Basically, you have to prepare that guy and submit this thing. But if you do that, you have to submit that many times. Here, the way I did, I'm telling the system, okay, pass only 2 records at a time. So, but if you have to do the simulate the same thing, you have to get maybe whatever the records, and you have to loop through and basically capture. I mean, you have to separate those 2 records out, and then submit the batch again. I mean, submit this execute method, or the, I mean, class method, this method, and so that's how you have to submit multiple times.
Okay.
So basically this execute method, no, not, that's not the one. Contact. Yeah, this execute method you can call, but you have to call multiple times. So now let's go back and look at this batch, how it fired. So here there was total batch 1. See here, now we got 15 batches. That is because I think we have 15, I mean, total 30 contacts. Let's look at how many contacts we have in the system.
Oh, because you mentioned 2.
Yeah, it basically split that into 15. And so, and also if we look at our batch, I mean, the debug log here, since it ran multiple times, see here, each batch, it went into that, and also it should have gone to our trigger each time. It should have written all those messages. Yeah, so running
Yes.
future, so that is one. Contacts to update 2. So let's okay, so let's see here. Yeah, even though we submitted 30, so each batch, I mean, they must have gone inside into this execute method, but I think we have only four contacts that have tasks associated with that. And here we are saying, okay, update this guy only if we have these records to update. So even though we have 30 contacts, because those 30 contacts, I mean, not all of them have this tasks associated with that, and those contacts won't go through this update process. So that's why I think let's see how many times this one came. So there are two that went through here. It should be at least 4 records. I mean, that is one. Is a debug. Okay, let's check our in the circle statement, how many contacts are updated. This guy. Yeah, I mean, all those things got updated, but this debug statement, for some reason, I mean, I was expecting to see 2 debug statements that should have been populated for us. Okay, contact update size 1. Okay, let's see this thing, how many times this guy. Yeah, so basically that is 1, that is 1, 2. Why it is showing 2? Okay. Yeah, I mean, we should see at least 4 contacts to be updated. Contacts update size 1. So I went through that. So one time one. Right. I mean, it should have gone through at least. We should definitely see 4 contacts to be updated. Yeah, but either way, we saw all 4 contacts got updated. Maybe there may be some logic wrong here, how I'm writing this thing. But behind the scenes, we saw all the contacts got updated with the right date. So that's how we fire. I mean, there will be a lot of different use cases. I mean, this, but bottom line is, if you have to write any batch class, you have to implement this batchable interface, and you have to define these 3 methods. And inside the finish method, you can finally send some audit trails to the support team. And the main heart of this thing is in the execute method, and the start method is where you decide what records that has to go through the process. And also one more thing here, we better not to use inner circles and all. If at all you have to do any further processing on the records, it's better to do it in the execute method. That way, on the small chunks of data, so you are executing circle queries, and it will be fast performance there. So that's how, I mean, there will be I mean, a lot of innovative ways how you can schedule these things, and how you can use these batch jobs. And I mean, any enterprise, wherever you go, you will see a lot of business use cases for this thing. I mean, very powerful feature. So that's the batch job. And typically, I mean, if at all we want to schedule this thing, so basically there is another one, schedule batch, and potentially that one also you can say when to execute this one. Let's say, I mean, here when you are executing, it is immediately executing. But there are sometimes we have to say, hey, don't update it. Don't run this thing. I mean, usually in production scenario, we don't want to run these mass updates during the business hours. You may want to run those maybe in the middle of the night, or maybe after 7 a.m., 7 p.m., something like that. So that's where this schedule would come handy just to see that thing. So let's go back and use this our favorite simple script to wipe off that all those field values, and potentially now all of these values again become empty, and now this should be 0 values here. Oh, sorry, I should have student circle. So now all those records will be empty with blank dates. And now when we execute this thing, potentially you will see the syntax is, we are saying, okay, what is the batch job that you want us to execute, or you are telling the system to execute, and what name you want to give. And this number is the one that we are saying, okay, after how many minutes. So we were executing now. Do you want to execute maybe after 1 hour or something? That's what we are telling here. And also the scope, if you want to pass how many records per batch that you want to pass, I believe that's one, you can add one more parameter. And so now, so this one basically gave that 0 records. All our contacts don't have the last completed date. Now, if we execute this guy, system.schedule batch, let's execute this thing and we'll go back, check. So now we call that contact batch, and the behind the scenes. Now this is a different place. We need to see schedule.
So it will take only hours, Shrikant?
Minutes.
Oh, 1 minute. Okay.
So, okay, it should come here.
No.
It's, okay, let's see whether it ran already. Let's go back. Apex jobs. It's supposed to wait for 1 minute. No, it didn't come here. Let's see if there is any. Okay, I think there was something happened here. Terminal, nothing is there. Output. Unexpected token, error line 1. 38. Okay. It's good. It's selected test.
I think previously only it's not selected properly.
Oh, okay. So now if we go back to the scheduled one. So now we got that guy. So basically we said this is the title that we give, schedule contact last touch date batch, whatever. So that's this guy. And so submitted 9:45, and we said to run it after 1 minute. So it is saying 9:46 p.m. It is going to run. So let's see. Again, any of these asynchronous ones, it won't run immediately. It will execute when the resources are available. Even if you say, hey, run it at 9:30, there is no guarantee that it will run exactly at 9:30. So basically it will try to run, but if the system is busy, it won't run. It will wait for the resources to be available. Whereas synchronous one, basically it will wait, and it will, as soon as you said it, so it has to run. So that's the difference. Usually it is about minutes difference. It will run. Yeah. So now it's gone here. Now if you go back to that batch, whatever that thing earlier was checking, Apex jobs. So again, so since we did not pass any scope value, saying, okay, how many number of records pass to each batch, it basically was able to pass the 200 default, and it executed that same batch. The only difference is we were able to tell the system when to run it, whereas the other one, as soon as you execute it, it will try to run it. I mean, in both cases, sometimes it can even go into queue, and basically you will see some status here saying, okay, it is waiting in the queue, those kind of thing. But if you want a scheduled one, potentially you can do this thing. And also on the classes, whatever the batch class that you schedule, you can also add implement schedulable or something. So then potentially, I believe that's good enough. I think. Let's see. Okay, maybe I need to add comma or something. Okay, we need to execute one more method. Basically, when we want to schedule, let's go back, check some syntax here. Yeah, so we need to add this method, global, either global or this guy. So one more execute method. And since we are following public, let's give this public. And now in this guy, so basically we can say we need to call this execute method from here, or we have to put everything. How do we do this? So we need to call. Let's look at this guy. So yeah, maybe here we can call this guy fire effects. So this thing here we can say this thing. So here we are saying we are asking them to execute this thing. So basically we created this schedulable because we said schedulable interface implementation. It is asking us to create a method, execute method with this input parameters, and it is asking us to implement. So now I think it should take it. Yeah, so with that thing, so the main advantage with this guy, we can say when to execute it. So now, I mean, earlier we were saying, okay, hey, after 5 minutes, run it and those things. Now with this guy, so there is little more that advantage with this guy. Now, if you go back to Apex classes, and so there is this schedule Apex, and here, I mean, let's say if, the process has to run, I mean, this batch has to run every last. Yeah, I mean, since it is going to be scheduled, it doesn't make sense to add contact class. So that guy, and now we need to say which class we want. So now the only class that has, I mean, in the system with schedulable implementation is contact batch. So, I mean, when you look for these things, it only shows that only that class, and we select. And now we can say, okay, hey, I want this to run every week, so and so time. And here we can say maybe today Thursday, so we'll select Thursday, and also when you want to end this thing and preferred start time. And since we are, I mean, this one will give only every hourly base. So let's say we say at 10 p.m. Every day we want this to run, and potentially if we save it, and it is going to run on the desired schedule. Now, if we go back to this Apex scheduler, and we will see that thing waiting. So basically, now we submitted at 9:52, and the next run will happen at 10 p.m. And when the next run happens, I mean, if we get our data, I mean, that's a small script that run again, and that will wipe out all those contacts, last updated date, and again, it will have some data for us. And at 10 o'clock, whenever the 10 o'clock comes, and it will basically run the same batch, and it will set the values again. So that's the schedulable one. I mean, we looked at feature method, how to use, especially that one we only need whenever we want um, to send some emails or maybe some web services we want to call from the same trigger. When something happened, that's when we want to write. Like from the trigger scenario, we can call that feature methods. But the only thing is there we have small requirements saying, okay, you can only pass the primitives. Then we looked at the batch class. So what if there are a number of records in the system, if you want to update all of them based on some business requirements. So then we will go for batch. And for a batch, how to schedule the batch. I mean, there are two ways to schedule. So either you can use schedule batch and you can pass after how many minutes. But if you want to control every week or something, so on the batch job, we have to implement a little bit of implementation, and then it will be available in Salesforce, and admins can go and set those schedulable things with their things, so they can schedule whenever they want to. So there is one more small item we can quickly go through, and I think we can end the class for today. So the last one, any questions? I mean, I think I did not even check with you.
Not much, Shrikant.
Yeah, I mean, maybe too much information for sure.
Yeah.
But definitely, I mean, everything is very logically should be syncing to you guys.
Right, right.
Should be straightforward, but I believe you may have to just go through it one more time, maybe take some, maybe some use cases, and potentially it will slowly, definitely sink in. I mean,
Yeah.
logically, at least it should make sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the last one is, I mean, same scenario. So let's take that thing. So, I mean, we said the queuable one, sorry, feature methods only take primitives, but we, let's say, we want to take, I mean, not non-primitives. Basically, sometimes we may want to pass some contact object or the object, a subject itself. At that time, we have to use this queuable thing. And again, the implements is going to change. Here, typically, it is going to be only one method that we need to use here. Basically, here, that's the execute method. Whereas batch method at least needs three implementations, whereas this guy needs only one implementation. And before this thing, so let's make one small change here. I mean, we can contact batch, and there is contact service, and actually contact service has this thing. So let's create one more method here, and we will move all this logic from here to that one. So basically we pass this contact list to that one, and that one will go through this, we will move all this logic there. So we will call this, yeah, maybe we'll call this guy. Yeah, we can actually call same method, but we this time we won't set feature method, and this also will give different input. So that way, even though same method, it based on the input that we are passing, it will know which method it has to take it. And so we will say contacts here, and we will remove all this logic, and the logic that is in the execute method, we will take it and we will move all that stuff in here. So this guy. let's take this guy. So we moved all of that, and we have this contact list. We don't need this guy. We'll pass that guy from there. So let's call this guy as contact list itself. And now that one will pass, and we don't need this guy here. On the contact batch, the only thing that we need is this guy. And let's actually delete all this thing here. And, so now we will call this contact service method here, contact this guy, contact batch, contact batch service. Say last modified day, and the method pass this guy. Let's apply this guy. Okay. Okay, we did not deploy this guy, contact. We deploy that guy. We deploy this guy. Oh, okay. So we this Apex class has a batch of future pending in progress. You can bypass this by allowing the deployments with Apex deployments. Okay. So because we scheduled that one, right? So that's the one it is stopping us. We may have to delete this guy. Yeah, let's, I mean, since we are almost at 10 p.m., let's run this guy. That way we will see the scheduled one also is happening. And then we will delete this guy immediately, since we said, okay, it has to run every week. And it will execute this guy. Again, it will add one more thing that next one will say it will run next 6/3 at 10 p.m. So let's wait for a minute. I mean, let it go through. And
Yeah, 6-5.
oh, okay, it changed. Okay, why? Okay, well, Friday. We skipped Friday, Saturday, Sunday kind of thing. That's why we it didn't run for the next one. And now, basically, when the Apex jobs, that one, the new one should be there at 10 o'clock, and that should be running at 10 p.m. So basically, the same batch. It ran because of that scheduled thing. There is another scheduled Apex. So that guy. Job type that is saying queued. I believe this is for that the next thing, I think queued one. So yeah, so this one will run maybe that other one, as it said, 6/5. Now what we have to do, we have to go back to this scheduled Apex one. I think they were saying, so either some setting that we need to change. You can bypass this error by allowing deployments with Apex jobs in the deployment setting page in setup. Okay, maybe we need to check that guy. So I mean, this one I haven't seen before. Let's go check the deployment settings. Yeah, I mean, typically I used to we used to delete that guy. It looks like Salesforce made some changes. I think deployment settings. So they are saying Apex job.
Bypass the server.
Yeah, bypass the server by allowing deployments with Apex jobs. Okay, yeah, this guy. So potentially we need to select this guy.
Enable them. Okay.
And now, Okay, now if we try to deploy, so we already deployed contact service. This one is already there with the last completed task date. Now we need to deploy this guy. So let's, yeah, now it was able to deploy. Now next time when it runs, potentially it will take this new code and it will execute. Basically, it will call that method. Now the small thing that we wanted to try, we wanted to use the queuable service. So all we are trying to say with the queuable one, mm, we want to call this service, and like you said, so we want to pass that list. So let's say you already know what contacts that you want to update, and that contacts the list you should be able to pass as subjects, and it will go through that thing and it will update the same logic. Basically, we have one class, one method, and we are calling it from different places. So I mean, if you want to call it from the trigger now, we can call this guy. The only thing that we need to do, so we need to create another class, a queuable class. So let's, I don't know whether we can do it on in interface here with the queuable. Let's see. Is allowing us to do. And this guy needs a different, I mean, if we try to deploy this guy, it will say, because we added one more interface, and it might ask us to implement another execute method something. So let's see. So now contact class system queuable execute. So it is asking us to implement a different interface. I think we can get this guy. Basically, this is the guy. So we need this guy. I mean, just this implementation, and we can go back to contact batch. And so here we will say this is for the queuable. And so now we know we have that thing. And the class that we need to fire is this guy, contact service. Yeah, so the same thing. We may have, yeah, let's click this guy. So the same thing. But how do we get the context? Yeah, let's see that thing. So logic is this thing that it has to execute. And okay, yeah. So when we call this method, we need to call the constructor, and through the constructor we can pass whatever the list that we want to pass. So now we have this constructor. I mean, for the class we have constructor. For that guy we can pass variables. Now let's define, maybe we can call this guy as contact queuable, just so that queuable list, and that is some name. And now we define this guy, so the same public variable to that batch. And so let's name this guy contact queuable, or let's call this queuable contact list. So queuable contact list. So take that guy and we will set that one. And when the method is called, we need to pass this thing, and that's where we kind of follow a little bit of syntax here. The same variable, and we already defined that variable. That's what we are calling. And here we will say so we need this variable one. So we have method. Let's we have to pass that guy. Okay, we have to say what is the data type. All these counts. So basically, we are going to pass when we are calling this guy. We have to set the values through the constructor, and when we call this queuable one, so because we are saying we are going to say okay, hey, call queuable, so that's where it is going to call this. I mean, this method will get executed, but this method again we are calling the same contact service method that we defined earlier, and so that way we will pass this list. So that's how this one will work. And now if you go back, somehow we need to call this guy. So now let's go back to the trigger, and when something is updated, instead of calling the future method, now this time we are going to call uh, the queuable one. So from the trigger. So this guy we have that guy, and this time if you want to so directly we need contacts list. So I mean, we need to do some crazy stuff here. So this guy is going to give us only the contact set. Now we need to get the contact IDs. So we can get that contact ID. I mean, this is little weird way of implementation, but still we can. I mean, if you want to use queuable, so this is how we will be using. So now all we have to do is we will maybe we can either comment this guy, or maybe let's write this task service, and task service will come here with trigger.new, and from trigger this method will call. From here we want to call instead of future method we want to call future. So now we will call the queuable effects. So the way we are going to call, so for now, let's contact set, we need that one. So now we need contact, list contact. So let's call this guy as comms. And now we will say we need for the contact service, the main fields that we need for this thing to execute. We need who ID. Yeah, so basically at least these things no, this is contact. To update. Okay, basically last modified date. So contact ID. This is the service, contact list. From contact list, when we are preparing set again. So from the set, okay, so all we need is just contact ID. I think let's go back to this trigger as service. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't even need a last updated thing. So, but I'm just passing this thing. Ideally, this one doesn't even need that thing. Task service. Contact ID. So we'll pass this set. So we got this list of contacts. Now we can call this queuable effects. So now if we see how to pass this guy, queuable effects, yeah, here we got all that stuff. It is going to return that ID also for us. So now let's go back to task service. System.enqueue job, and we need the contact queuable, I mean contact batch. Yeah, so contact batch. So we are passing that constructor, and immediately it will go. It will assign that list through the constructor to the queuable contact list, and then it will execute this method. So now all we have to do is, so we will comment out this part. Uh, so we will use the other ones. So we got this guy. So now let's deploy the batch job first. I mean, we don't typically put everything on this one. We typically write different classes, but I'm just using one class here. So let's see. Constructor not defined contact batch. Constructor not. Okay. The expression cannot be a statement 414. Click list on 414. List on list on public contact batch. This matching global. This global.
I think implements.
What do you see? Oh, okay. We didn't assign values. Yeah. What happened? Constructor not defined. Constructor 2031. Contact 20. Schedulable. Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah. We are using this thing, and this guy we are not passing any values. I think it's better to create a new class and simply label. So we can simply move this contact service. All we have to do is in the contact batch. So we have to use this implement queuable, only that part, not the other things. Contact queuable. We will remove these other two, and now we can use this interface and these things in that one. Let's put here. And, this public property is the one that it needs, and then this guy is the one that should go here. This one is a different constructor. We don't need this guy. And now all it needs is the other execute method. So this execute method has to go out from here, and we can add this guy here, and it has that thing, and it will call this thing. And now this one should be fine. Let's go remove this thing from here, and we don't need this guy, and we don't need this implementation here. So we don't need this guy. We don't need this guy. I'm just resetting this guy here. So this should be as is. And now we should be able to deploy this guy. So this one is good. Now this guy should be good too. Variable cons. Okay, so we need to define. mm, And then take here. So now we have this thing, and now let's go back to our task service, and instead of this guy, so basically we will call our contact queuable, and for contact we need this contact queuable, and we are passing this list to this guy, and so now we are going to use this contact queuable by passing these values, and now it knows which records it has to operate on, and it will proceed. So I mean, all we are doing is instead of feature, so we are using queuable. So again, same drill. So let's go back to our small script. Let's remove those thing, all those contacts, last modified date, and this time we will run. Yeah, actually, we shouldn't have done that. So, but that's okay. Now, all we have to do is, so the way we are going to trigger this thing by creating a contact. I mean, no, not contact, but by creating a task and setting the task to complete. And immediately, this time instead of firing that future thing, it should fire a queuable effects instead of feature. So now let's create a task here. So here not started, and we can directly set this one also right here. We created a task for Arthur thing, and if we see this Arthur guy, so Arthur guy doesn't have any last completed task date is empty since we ran the script. Now we are setting this guy. This I think we created this one right now. This task, yeah, not started. Let's set this status to complete, and now our batch will fire, and when it fires, now the first thing that we need to see in here fx jobs. So basically it fired that queuable one, and so the queuable class is fired, and now if we go back, I think it is running both for inbound, I mean the both trigger scenarios before and after, I think. So I mean we only updated one task. Yeah, so let's go back to check the contact orders. Yeah, so now we got the same thing, and the job is successfully executed, and it got us the date. I mean, there are multiple ways. I mean, now at least you should have understood the power of the batch. I mean, you can run for multiple scenarios. I mean, there will be different use cases. Bottom line is there are different ways you can fire things and for different needs. So that's the bottom line. So there are feature methods you can use it. There are queuable effects that you can use. With the queuable effects, the advantage is you can change the queuable jobs. Basically, let's say account ownership. After account ownership, you want to change contact ownership, and after contact, you want to change opportunity ownership kind of thing. So you can put them in the chain, and after one job is finished, you can fire another job. So those kind of things you can do with Queueable. That's where the advantage. Queueable, the main thing is with the feature, we cannot pass the subjects. With Queueable, you should be able to pass the subjects. And the other thing is with Queueable, so there are chaining is another advantage. So so that's the asynchronous attacks in total. I will try to send some tutorials or trailhead. I mean, if you go through that, I mean, hopefully you will understand it a lot better with all this explanation. Okay.
Sure, thanks, Shrikant.
Yeah, I know a lot of stuff. I mean, since we also have, I mean, I don't want to drag this for a long time. Otherwise, we could have taken future for one class, Queueable for another class, and
I thought, yeah.
that for another class. I mean, most probably, I mean, you have to get the concepts from here, and everything is in the documentation. Basically, nothing new that I'm telling here. I mean, if you go to Apex reference guide, you should be able to see not Apex reference. I think there's in the other one. Apex reference. This one, Apex reference, typically will give all the class and those things. Apex, there is another one. Apex development guide, I think. Apex development guide. Yeah, how to write Apex. So this is where writing Apex, and there should be. Okay. Yeah, when you go here, potentially you will see all these things. Uh, yeah, here. So basically the Queueable scheduler, batch Apex feature. So everything is in here. And I mean, more than this documentation. So I mean, that documentation should be good enough whenever you want to write. So basically, what are the things that you want to use, all that stuff. It will get that one, but there is a trailhead tutorial that will walk you through a lot of stuff, and also they explain you in the video how to go through and how to write those things when you have time. So go through that one. I think it will sync easily.
Yeah. So, are you done right now, Shrikant, or are you planning to take a few more?
I mean, I want to cover a little bit of integration scenarios. I mean, pretty much with these things, you should be able to handle the backend Apex related thing. I mean, we have seen how to write with how to work with triggers, how to do the async. I mean, Apex asynchronous Apex. So this is where you will be spending a lot of time as a Apex developer, and we haven't talked how to talk to other systems from Salesforce. I mean, we
Okay.
know Callouts will help that one. If you have a web service, how to call that one. So maybe we need to see those things. One class I want to cover that thing, and maybe we also talked about a few tools that in the initial class. Where was that thing? So one Excel document that initially we started talking about. Actually, let me go through this GitHub. I put all these things in the GitHub.
Yeah.
Actually, I mean, I try to write some document here in the README. So this is how we went through. So basically, I tried to put all these details in, I mean, as thorough as I can. Day one, what we covered, and so whatever the homework that we said, and also day two, we talked about the data types, and I gave you the links here.
Yeah.
And day three triggers, and day four again triggers. We talked little elaboratively, and the tools inspector and also the other tools that we talked about, all that stuff. And so the next topics I kind of write down here. So the asynchronous, queuable, batch, and all that stuff we discussed today. I will add that to date 5 and day 5, and also I will put some links here. That way, I mean, you should be able to just go here, quickly glance through, and you should be able to understand what happened in that class. There was one thing that the first class, introduction class, where we put some Excel document. Yeah, this guy. So this is the one. Where was this? How do I download this file? Yeah, I mean, this is the one you asked for that question. I'm trying to show you.
Yeah.
We spend a lot of time on Apex, and I mean, we haven't really talked about JavaScript, HTML. Maybe we will wait for that one for some time. We will, when we have time, we will go through that front end one. But at least you should be able to do some Apex work now. And we looked at some of the tools. I mean, developer console. I mean, I intentionally avoided that one as much as possible. And the IDs, definitely we spend quite a lot of time. We use some of the CLI commands.
Yeah.
And Git, I kind of covered a little bit with
Yeah.
you guys, and GitHub a little bit. And so the other things, maybe something, I mean, if you guys know how to use Postman, that's fine.
I yeah, I'm not aware of it.
Yeah, so basically I use Postman pretty much every day in my job, especially with a lot of integrations and all. Definitely very powerful tool. I think as a developer, you should, I mean, whenever someone gives you some web service or something, this is the one you would typically go in, play with it, and just give that one. Also, even if external systems say, okay, hey, how can I hit your system? Potentially, you will give some. In Postman, they ask you, usually they ask a collection or something, and you provide the details, and you can also give call command, how they can call your system and all. I mean, very powerful. So definitely worth spending a little bit of time. So the thing is, one maybe little bit of extra work, one class for Apex, especially uh, more focus on integration, and then the Postman, how to use Postman. That's the one I want to cover. And I showed GitHub Bitbucket thing, but I will provide you some links how to access those things. And with that, at least you should be able to attend. I mean, if you follow this thoroughly, you should be able to crack some developer I mean, interviews, and maybe without much help, you should be able to work on your own. So, I mean, that's how I see it with this knowledge.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if I don't mind me asking, Swati, where are you from? I mean,
I am from Virginia, Shrikant. Actually, it is 11:30.
you are on East Coast. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, currently I'm with Department of Health. There is DC Department of Health. They actually have few projects on Salesforce. So I'm not sure if I will get a chance to work on any
Are
of
you
those
working as a
projects.
full-time employee there, or
No, I'm a contractor over here actually, but it's been like 7 years I'm with them.
oh,
So
7 years?
yeah, yeah.
I mean, you should be able to easily get in there, I think. I mean, especially when you have 7 years experience there. I mean,
Yeah, I'm in a
maybe
contract.
see if you can, I mean, take developer certification. Then,
That's
I mean, they should, I mean, I'm sure you must have given good impression on them by now. I mean, since you are there
yeah.
for 7 years, I'm pretty sure you must have good in the good books of those
Yeah,
guys.
yeah, yeah. Actually, I spoke to my CTO and stuff. Like, I mean, I don't know if
Hmm.
it works out or not, but
Yeah.
I'm trying my thing over there. So I thought this will be really helpful to either way. I was anyways preparing, like going through the trial head and stuff like that. So
Yeah, and see, I mean, if you, I mean, I'm sure, I mean, based on how I'm seeing you asking questions and all, I mean, the way you are able to follow, I don't see any reason why you can't take these exams and maybe get into this thing.
I mean, I can completely relate to the coding
Yeah,
part,
I mean, it's the
Shrikant,
same thing, right? I
because
mean, it
because I
cannot
have
be
some
something different.
experience to it, but definitely I don't know these tools like,
Yeah, I mean,
Postman.
it's all understanding a little bit of syntax and most probably similar things. I mean, when you have to write some bad job, I mean, it's the same things will be done in SAP little different way. I mean, since I have a SAP background, there we call it as program. You can schedule it once you have program, all that stuff. Yeah, pretty much every software would need the same tools again and again. And it's a matter of building it necessarily and maybe making it little more easy, especially with new softwares. They have to make
Yeah.
it easy compared to some old software.
How do you think the market is now, Shrikant? Like for
Definitely very bright, I would say. So,
very bright. Okay.
I mean, yeah, a lot of new things. I mean, that's the problem with Salesforce. Every other day, I mean, it used to be the case with AWS. Every day they will release one software or other, especially with AWS. Now Salesforce is also like that. Basically, I mean, they have this nice framework, and everything that you build in Salesforce, it is mobile ready, and the database you are able to expose it, and the way they expose the API. I mean, you create a table or object, it is already available for external system to update the records or do anything. Very, very handy, I think. So,
Okay.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, bye.
Sorry,
So,
I
yeah.
don't want to take much of your time, but maybe I'll call you up sometime, Shrikant. Like,
Yeah. I mean, if you get into job, hopefully I can help you. I mean, I don't see much need for you, but I mean, if you need, definitely you can call me. So, and if you
Yeah,
want,
I think I'm more looking for the interview perspective and
yeah.
things.
So, yeah, we can spend some time.
All right, Shrikant. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Thanks for your
good night.
time.
Bye.
Yeah. Bye.